I have already done a few industrial techno kick drum tutorials in past, but this kick drum is probably the most distorted one I have ever made for a YouTube video. What is interesting about this kick drum sound creation, aside from the fact I will teach you how to use lots of distortion while keeping the kick drum sound nice, you will see also a new method for blending the rumble reverb with the kick drum without using a sidechain compression. You can download the project from this tutorial from my Patreon page, and for more industrial techno sounds, check out my hard techno reinforcement, sample and serum preset pack. Now let's launch the Ableton and remake the kick from the I Am Everything I Hate track made by Hades. With what kind of kick should we begin to end up with such a distorted sound? My recommendation will be, again, the Vengeance Essential Clap Sounds sample pack, and the clubby kicks folder we will find Appropriate samples. We need something with lots of power and punch in the beginning. Distorting the kick will be also easier if our sample has some high-end transient too. Such kick samples are perfect candidates. Let's use one of these samples in the drum rack and play the sample in a simple 4/4 pattern. We will be using lots of distortion soon, so it's a good idea to already make the sample quieter and simpler. With that, we will avoid going over 0 decibel ceiling, which is usually troublesome. This kick drum also needs to be shorter, because in the end, the distorted kick needs to have that sharp but short transient. This kick sample will be processed in 2 different ways, so now I am using an audio effect track to create 2 processing chains, one for the distorted transient and the other one for reverb rumble. Let's take care of the distortion at first. We will need lots of high-end and crunch coming from there, so the best plugin for this job will be the Isotope Trash 2. According to Trash 2 manual, the distortion is the easiest to set up if we increase the input volume to make the input gain meter yellow, so let's move that fader up. We will want to use only the trash module, so let's start adjusting this plugin by picking a decent waveshaper distortion curve and setting all the distortion settings. These include the pre-gain, drive, and waveshaper curve scaling. The sound is promising, but on top of the current distortion I want to add something more. The current waveshaper curve can be modified with another curve we can create in this window. I will make the purple waveform more folded by right-clicking the yellow midpoint and choosing the sign option. What else can change the sound of distortion? For example, pitching down the kick sample. Or using an equalizer before the distortion. For sound design purposes, I recommend playing around with a high-pass filter with lots of filter resonance. Currently, the kick has lots of high frequency noise, which I can remove by using a low pass filter. All the steps we took now were to completely mangle the sound to get a type of crunch I need. This kick sound could be also a bit warmer, so let's return to the Trash 2 plugin to add just a bit more of distortion. This time I will add subtle saturation to warm up the kick. At last, I will match the volume levels of the kick with and without distortion to show you the overall kick transformation with trash too. The transient part of the kick is now nearly done, so let's create now the complementing reverb rumble. But before that, let me advertise myself quickly and just say that if you wish to have other sound design or music production subjects explained in such an easy and practical way, consider going onto my website to learn more about my private music production lessons. Free consultations are available as well. Now, in the rumble chain, I am going to use a convolution reverb plugin. This type of reverb, unlike the typical reverb you might know from, for example, most of Valhalla reverb plugins, can sound more shaky, unpredictable and defined. It sounds like a good choice for earth-shattering low-end rumble, doesn't it? The Convology XT plugin is free to download and can substitute the Ableton's hybrid reverb pretty well. Since we are using this plugin in a parallel processing chain, I will start by turning the mix all the way to 100%. No reverb will be hearable unless we pick an impulse response, that is the short audio sample from which the reverb is created. That is the first step towards creating the rumble sound. The reverb gives us now both low, mid and high frequencies. Since we want to use the reverb to create only the rumble sound that is filled with low frequencies, let's already use a low pass filter on that sound. Doing this in advance will also help us focusing on the low frequencies more, making the rumble creation easier. Rumble reverb sounds are very narrow in the stereo field. They can either be completely in mono or they can have just a little of the stereo width. It is essential to use the width knob to make the rumble sound more narrow and therefore more solid. We have to yet adjust a few settings that influence the rhythm of the rumble. All these highlighted knobs in theory have a different purpose, but from the practical point of view, they will all change the rhythm of the rumble. Only the stretch knob is a bit different. This one, aside from directly influencing the reverb length and rhythm, can also indirectly change the reverb's pitch. If the plugin's output starts to clip, that is, the volume of the output appears red on the meter, turn down the output knob to keep the rumble from clipping further. At last, I can turn off the normalize switch and add some input gain to the impulse response we just chose in the beginning. This will start saturating the rumble. The rumble sound we just created will not fill yet the whole beat with low frequencies. As you can see, this rumble sound is the loudest only in the beginning, but later the volume of this sound drops. To make the volume more consistent over time, we can use either a limiter compressor effect or a distortion effect. Yes, distortion effects not only make the sound fuller by adding new frequency content to the sound, they can as well reduce the dynamics of the sound in a similar way a limiter would. Since distortion effects are more fun, I am going to use the isotope trash tool once again to distort the rumble sound. I don't want to add any high end to the rumble, that's why the trash tool will be put before the low pass filter. Because all the higher frequencies that would be normally added if not the low pass filter are not audible, there isn't a need to be that sophisticated with using distortion here. That's why I didn't, for example, bother with adjusting the input gain at first. The rumble has to be exported now. One of the benefits of doing that could include avoiding low-end phasing, which makes the kick drum sound weaker and less solid. But from sound design point of view, we can manipulate the rumble sound more. I'm going to play the kick drum only once and solo the rumble chain. This is the sound I want to export now. What about the sidechain compression? Shouldn't the rumble be sidechained now to not overlap the low end of the rumble with the low end of the kick? Today we will make use of another technique. Typically, both kick drum and rumble sounds are occupying the same low end frequency range. Because both sounds are playing at the same time, there is usually a need to indeed sidechain the rumble to the kick to separate the low end. If I do that to my rumble sound now, I am using the Xsphere LFO tool to simulate the sidechain compression. Then the low frequencies are indeed separated, but when we listen to the low end of the whole kick, then we will hear that the low end is not that consistent over time. Another way to separate the low frequencies would be to simply high pass the distorted kick and to not use the sidechain compression on the rumble sound. Coming back to our distorted kick, I just need to use here a high pass filter after the isotope trash too. Let's make this kick take no space below around 100 Hz. That way the rumble will be the only sound that occupies the low end and there won't be any need to use a sidechain compression anymore. The kick sounds a bit dry, so let's enhance it with some reverb. I don't want the reverb to be hearable all the time, so I'm going to use the reverb only on the distorted kick sound. For that, as always, I'm using an audio effect track for parallel processing. The first chain, called dry, will play the kick drum without any reverb, but it doesn't mean I won't add here any effect. The kick has some weird squeaky sound that is caused by the isotope trash to distortion. I want to shorten the kick drum to cut it off. So on that chain I will add the LFO tool. The default settings are already applying the modulation curve to the volume with the right modulation rate. We only have to increase the grid size and make the kick shorter. Let's move now onto the reverb chain, where I will use the hybrid reverb effect. Because it's put in the parallel processing chain, I will set the dry wet to 100% immediately. To make the reverb adjustment easier, I will use only the convolution part of this effect. Thus, setting the reverb will remind a lot the Convology XT plugin I used a few minutes ago. I will start again by choosing the right impulse response. The reverb again has a bit too much of high end, that's why I will head now to the EQ section and make sure I have here both low and high pass filters set correctly. What is left is to fine-tune the reverb by adjusting the impulse response with attack, decay and size knobs, and this will be the same as adjusting the rhythm of the reverb back in the Convology XT plugin. When the reverb is that wide, the kick drum will not sound focused, so I will use the stereo knob to make the reverb be played in mono. The kick drum has to be distorted after all, so I'm going to distort the reverb too. I will use for that the old CamelPhat free plugin that, just like for example the Native Instruments Massive, had its prime time quite a long time ago. Let's load the default preset and use these 4 different types of distortion available to mangle the reverb. Just a little bit of compression will not hurt either. At last, let's turn down the output volume to make it as loud as the input. After the CamelPhat, I am using the LFO tool in a similar way as before. Now, instead of shortening the kick sound after distortion, I am making just the reverb shorter. That will keep the tail of the kick cleaner, because it will be only the rumble that is hearable at the end of each kick drum hit. This reverb can be equalized now. As you can see on the frequency spectrum, the CamelPhat plugin through distortion added back some of the low end to the sound. So once again we will need a high pass filter, but here in the equalizer I will also make other adjustments. In the end, I will make this reverb quiet enough. All three sounds can be now glued together. Let's rub the drum rack and use on the whole sound some saturation for gluing. For that, I can use once again the isotope Trash 2. After Trash 2, I am using a multiband compression. This will also help gluing the kick drum, mainly in the mid-frequencies area, but also some low end is compressed too. To not make this tutorial too long, I will just show you all the settings of the compressor and turn on and off both mid and low frequencies compressor to show you the difference in sound. But I promise I will make soon a multiband compression tutorial to which I will always redirect in future if necessary. After everything is compressed, I can equalize the whole kick. The EQ8 here is mainly removing some annoying high frequencies content. The last important thing in the group processing would be to make the kick drum a bit more clicky. This can be partially done in the multiband compressor I used a while ago, but let's try a different method now. I'm going to use the transient shaper tool, which is just another type of effect to control the amount of punch in the kick sound. The punctuate from Newfangled Audio in the beginning looks complex, but that's only because of the bottom equalizer section that has advanced transient shaping functionality. If we turn it off, we are left with only 4 faders to adjust. The most important ones will be the amount of transient emphasis and its lengths. Set all of these faders up to your taste. Apparently the plugin works way too heavily, so let's set the triwet knob and the output volume to blend this effect nicely. In the end, I did a small experiment with adding more rhythm to the low end. On the rumble sound only, I used another LFO tool. Here I add an LFO modulation to the volume of the whole rumble sound. The modulation curve is set to the sine wave, and with such settings, I'm hoping to add a bit of wobble to the sound.